A cowboy gave his blanket to a freezing Apache girl, unaware that, by her people's laws, he had just made her his wife. The next morning, riders appeared at his ranch, bringing elders and a decision he couldn't simply walk away from. He found himself caught between the tribe, whose daughter he was now bound to protect, and white settlers, for whom such an alliance was treason. Soon came the threats, the officials, the rifles. Everything around him began to fracture, and he was sinking deeper into a conflict he never meant to start. And it all began on that very day. Wade Colton had been driving strays back toward his cabin when he spotted her. She was sitting against a rock, arms wrapped tight around herself, head bowed. At first, he thought she might be injured, but as he got closer, he saw the truth. She was freezing. A young Apache woman, maybe 20, wearing nothing but a worn deerskin dress and thin moccasins soaked through. He hesitated. Helping her could mean trouble. The local Apache bands weren't exactly friendly with white settlers, and Colton knew how easily a simple gesture could be misunderstood. But she didn't move, didn't even flinch when he dismounted. Her face was pale, lips blue. She looked like she'd been out all night. Wade took the thick wool blanket from his saddlebag, the one his mother made before he left Kentucky, and approached slowly. "I ain't here to hurt you," he said. "You need this more than I do." She didn't reply, but her eyes met his, sharp and wary. He draped the blanket over her shoulders. She gripped it tight. He sat down a few feet away, started a small fire, and waited. After a while, her shivering eased. She never said a word, just leaned against the rock and closed her eyes. By dawn, she was gone. Colton thought nothing more of it, figured she'd gone back to her people. But the next evening, as he chopped wood by the barn, he looked up to see a group of Apache riders on the ridge. 24, maybe more. The woman was with them. This time, she sat tall on a horse, wrapped in the same blanket. An elder rode forward and dismounted in front of Colton. His tone was even. "You gave her your blanket," he said. "She is the daughter of our chief," Colton nodded slowly. "She was cold. That's all." The elder's face was unreadable. "Among our people, a man does not give a blanket to a woman unless he means to take her as his wife." Colton blinked. "Say again." "You married her," the elder said. "And now we must speak of what comes next." Colton didn't move. The hatchet in his hand felt suddenly useless. The elder stood calm, but the Apache riders behind him watched like hawks. One wrong word, one sudden twitch, and this quiet talk might turn into something else entirely. "I didn't mean nothing like that," Colton said. "She was cold, looked half dead. I just helped her." The elder gave a small nod. "Intentions do not change meanings in our ways. The blanket is a sign. Protection, shelter, claim." Colton glanced past him to the girl. She still wore the blanket, held tight around her. Her expression was unreadable. Not angry, not afraid. Just watching. He turned back to the elder. "What's your name?" "I am Hakan, brother to Chief Taza, uncle to the girl you call woman. Her name is Ahyoka." Colton took a breath. "Hakan, I ain't looking for a wife." The older man's brow lifted slightly. "And yet, one may have found you." Colton stepped back, raising his hand slightly. "I didn't touch her. I didn't cross no line." "You gave her warmth," Hakan replied. "In our ways, that is enough." Colton looked to the ridge. More riders were coming. Younger men, all armed. This wasn't a discussion anymore. It was a gathering, a reckoning. "You say I married her," Colton said slowly. "What happens now?" Hakan's eyes narrowed. "Now we see what kind of man you are. Will you honor what you've started, or bring shame to her before her people?" Colton swallowed hard. He hadn't planned on any of this. Not a wife, not a tribe, not the weight of a promise he didn't know he'd made. But the sun was setting fast, and whatever came next, he was already in it. Colton stood his ground, though every instinct screamed to run or draw. But neither would end well. Not with 24 Apache braves watching, not with a young woman wrapped in his blanket looking like judgment itself. Hakan stepped closer. "You live alone, yes?" Colton nodded. 12 years now. No wife. No children. None left, Colton said. Hakan studied him. "You gave freely. That means something. But now the girl's honor is in question. She returned to her people wearing your blanket. And in our ways, that speaks louder than words." Colton rubbed his jaw. "Your ways are your ways, I respect that. But I didn't know. Where I'm from, a blanket's just kindness." Hakan nodded solemnly. "Then now you do know. And knowing, the choice becomes yours. You accept the bond, or you reject her." Colton looked at Ahioka again. She hadn't said a word, still holding that blanket close, like it was armor. Like she didn't quite know what to make of him either. "What happens if I say no?" he asked. Hakan didn't blink. "She loses honor. Her standing. A woman scorned by a man she shared a blanket with is seen as cast aside." Colton felt a sharp stab of guilt. He hadn't meant to trap her in anything. He was just trying to help. "I ain't the marrying kind," he muttered. "Then today, you may become one," Hakan said. "Or tomorrow, be remembered as the man who shamed the chief's daughter." Colton stared into the fire building behind Hakan's words. He hadn't wanted trouble, but it had found him anyway. And now a decision had to be made. One that might tie him to a people who never asked him in, or mark him as an enemy who gave help and then took it back. Colton didn't answer right away. His jaw clenched, eyes shifting from Hakan to the silent riders behind him, then back to the girl, Ahioka. She still hadn't spoken, still hadn't looked away. "I ain't the kind to make promises lightly," Colton finally said. "And I sure as hell ain't about to make one just to stay alive." Hakan raised an eyebrow. "Then speak truth," Colton exhaled. "Truth is, I don't know her. She don't know me. We don't even speak the same tongue." Hakan tilted his head. "Yet you gave what little you had to keep her warm. That says something more than words." A murmur rose among the younger warriors. One of them, barely more than a boy, stepped forward, spear in hand. His eyes burned like coals. "You mock our ways," the boy said in thick accented English. "You shame her." Colton turned slowly to face him. "No, son, I'm trying not to." Hakan lifted his hand, silencing the boy. "Easy, Chaska." The old man looked back at Colton. "You do not have to lie with her. You do not even have to stay. But if you speak before her people, if you say she is not your wife, then know this. The shame falls not just on her, but on you. And your name will be spit on by every fire circle from here to the Colorado line." Colton felt a knot tighten in his chest. This wasn't just about customs. This was about honor, pride, and face in front of her people. He looked at Ahioka again, and this time she spoke. "I did not ask for you," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "But I will not be pitied either." She stood, removed the blanket from her shoulders and held it out. "Take it back," she said. Colton stared at it, and then, to everyone's surprise, including his own, he didn't take it. The air around them stilled. Even the wind seemed to hush. Ahioka stood firm, arms extended, the blanket folded across her palms like an offering, or a challenge. Colton didn't move. The Apache riders watched without a word, every eye fixed on the space between the two. Hakan said nothing now. This moment wasn't his to guide. "I ain't taking it," Colton said finally. His voice was low, but it carried. "Because I gave it to you. Not as a trade, not for a claim, just because you were cold. And I still mean it." Ahioka's arms didn't lower. "Then you are afraid," she said flatly. Colton stepped closer. "No, I'm tired. And I've lived enough years alone to know what I am, and what I ain't." He looked her square in the eye. "But I won't shame you. Not in front of your kin." He turned to Hakan. "What happens if I say yes? If I accept it? What does that mean to you?" Hakan met his gaze evenly. You share a name, a future. You are brought before the elders. She becomes your wife in word and standing. Colton looked back at Ahioka. And if she don't want that, she has the right to deny it, Hakan replied. But the blanket, she did not throw it down. She brought it back to you. That means she leaves the door open. Colton let the silence stretch. Then, slow and steady, he reached out, not for the blanket, but for her hand beneath it. Her fingers twitched but did not pull away. Gasps rippled through the gathered riders. Colton said, I don't know what comes next, but I won't let her stand alone. And so the decision was made, not with a vow, not with a kiss, but with a touch. Ahioka lowered her eyes and did not let go. The Apache riders began murmuring among themselves, not angry, not jeering, but surprised, curious. Colton heard one voice say something sharp and fast in Apache, but Hakan raised his hand again, silencing them with a look. Then he nodded once, solemn. So be it. He turned to the gathered warriors. The bond is accepted. Wade Colton has honored the gift. The daughter of our chief walks beside him now, not as a stranger, but as wife. The reaction was swift. Riders dismounted. Several stepped forward to shake Colton's hand, others to speak to Ahioka. She said little, offering only nods or small words in return. Colton stood stiff as a fence post, not quite sure whether he'd just been pardoned or sentenced. Hakan placed a firm hand on Colton's shoulder. You will come with us tomorrow, before the chief. Didn't I just settle that now? Colton asked. Hakan shook his head. Tonight was her choice. Tomorrow, the chief gives his blessing. Or not. Colton glanced at Ahioka. She was speaking to one of the women now. Older, gray hair braided tight, eyes like knives. The woman was watching Colton as she spoke, measuring him. She's got people, Colton muttered. Hakan gave a faint smile. She has a nation. You just stepped into it. Colton looked toward the distant horizon. The sun had disappeared behind the hills. All he had was a fire still smoldering, a shack not fit for two, and a past that had no room for anyone. And now? Now he had a wife. Sort of. They stayed that night at Colton's ranch. Not all the warriors, but Hakan, Ahioka, and two older women who rode with her. The rest rode off before dusk, promising to return at dawn. Colton brought out what supplies he had: salted pork, beans, and the last of the cornmeal. He cooked over the fire while the others sat in a quiet circle outside. Ahioka hadn't spoken to him since she'd taken his hand. Colton tried not to let it bother him, but the silence weighed heavy. When he handed her a tin plate, she took it with a soft, "Thank you," in English. Her voice was tired, flat. He sat nearby, not too close. "Didn't mean to throw your life into a storm," he said. She looked at him, expression unreadable. "I chose to walk into it." They ate in silence. The wind picked up around the shack, whistling through the chinks in the wood. One of the older women said something to Ahioka. Colton caught a word or two. "Walachiai, chilichi," red blanket. That again. After dinner, Colton offered them his bedrolls, his shack, anything they needed. He'd sleep outside, under the stars. Wasn't the first time. As he stepped out to settle near the barn, Ahioka followed him. She wrapped the red blanket tighter around herself. "You don't have to do this," she said. He met her gaze. "I know. You could ride off tonight. They'd understand. Maybe even forgive." Colton stared out into the darkness. "Forgiveness ain't the same as forgetting," she nodded, "and neither of us can afford shame." He gave a quiet laugh. "Funny, huh? I gave you that blanket so you wouldn't freeze. And now it's the one thing setting fire to both our lives." Ahioka didn't laugh. "It's still warm," she said. Then she turned and walked back inside. At first light, Colton heard hoofbeats. Not rushed, not angry, just steady. He stood from his bedroll near the barn, brushing dust from his coat. Hakan was already saddling his horse. The two older women were packing what little they'd brought. Ahioka emerged from the cabin last. She looked rested but distant. The blanket was still with her. Hakan approached Colton. "You ride with me. Ahioka comes later. Tradition." Colton nodded, though he didn't understand half of it. "What should I expect?" Hakan tightened a strap. "The chief asks questions. You answer." "That simple?" "No," Hakan said flatly. "But it begins there." They rode east into the rising sun. It wasn't far, no more than an hour's ride, but it felt like Colton was leaving something behind, maybe the last bit of solitude he had. The moment they crested the ridge, he saw the camp. Tents in a wide ring, horses tethered along a stream, smoke curling from a dozen small fires. And at the center, a man seated on a woven mat, wrapped in a cloak of dark wool, his long white hair braided and adorned with feathers. Hakan dismounted and motioned Colton forward. "Do not speak first. Wait." Colton swallowed and stepped up. The chief lifted his eyes. They were sharp, cold, and heavy with judgment. "You are the man who gave her the blanket?" he asked. "I am," Colton said. "You understand what that meant?" Colton hesitated. "I didn't, but I do now." The chief studied him for a long moment. "And still you came." Colton nodded. The chief's face was still. "Then you will kneel." Colton's jaw tensed. He'd never knelt to a soul in his life. But he dropped to one knee, silent. The chief rose slowly. "Let us see what strength lies in the back of a man who bends without breaking." Colton stayed kneeling, dust clinging to his trousers, back straight. Around him, more of the tribe began to gather, curious, cautious. Men with braids and painted faces, women with hard eyes and firm stances. Children watched from behind their mothers' skirts. The chief circled him slowly, silent at first. "You gave a sacred gift without knowing it," he said at last. "But ignorance does not make a gesture less powerful." Colton kept his eyes on the ground. No disrespect was meant. The chief stopped behind him. "And what of your past, Colton? What does it hold?" Colton hesitated. "Loss." The old man nodded, as if he already knew. "And now you carry more. A name. A tie. I didn't plan it. No man plans the storm." There was a long pause. "You may rise," the chief said. Colton stood slowly. The chief looked him in the eye for the first time. "Some here do not want this union. They think you will weaken her, or use her, or abandon her like so many white men have done before." Colton didn't argue. He let the words settle. "But Ahioka is not a child. She did not return that blanket. And she walked with you by choice." Colton nodded. "She's got more steel in her than most men I've known." At that, something flickered in the chief's eyes. Approval, maybe. Ahioka stepped forward then, appearing between the rows of watching faces. She stood beside Colton, not behind him. The chief looked at her. "You still carry his blanket," he said. Ahioka met his gaze. "It is mine." He gave a slow, solemn nod. "Then you are his." The wind passed through the camp as the crowd fell silent. The chief raised one hand, then slowly turned in a circle, his voice strong and steady. "She has claimed. He has not run. The blanket was not taken. It was given." No one spoke. Even the horses stood still as if waiting. "We will honor the old ways," the chief continued, "but we will also watch closely. Trust is not given freely. It is earned, and earned again." Colton nodded once. "Fair enough." Hakan stepped forward and handed Colton a woven band. Not a ring, but a kind of binding cord, dyed red and black. "You place it on her wrist," he said. "She may remove it when she wishes. But until then, it marks the bond." Colton took it carefully, turned to Ahioka. Her eyes met his, steady and unreadable. He tied the cord gently around her wrist. When he finished, she looked down at it, then back at him. "You don't have to mean forever," she said quietly, "only for him. But you have to mean now." Colton's voice was low. "I do." A murmur rippled through the gathering, not of protest, of acceptance. The chief stepped back, allowing space to breathe, to settle. The ceremony, if it could be called that, was done. Ahioka stood beside Colton, not behind, not apart. "You just got tied into a nation," Hakan said under his breath. "And maybe into something bigger than that." Colton exhaled. "Yeah, I can feel it." Somewhere deep inside him, past the dust and scars, a flame had stirred. He hadn't come here looking for love, but love might have found him anyway. That evening, Colton sat beside Ahioka near a cooking fire, the tribe slowly returning to normal rhythms. Laughter drifted in from one side of the camp, drumbeats on the other. Kids ran barefoot through the brush. And still, he felt the weight, not of the blanket or even the new bond, but of being watched. Ahioka seemed to notice too. She stirred her food slowly, eyes scanning the edge of the gathering. "They don't all want you here," she said. Colton nodded. "I figured. There are some who think you're dangerous, others who think you're weak. And you?" She looked at him without blinking. "I think you're unfinished." Colton smirked. "That makes two of us." She almost smiled, but it didn't last. She leaned in slightly. "There's a man, tall, scars down his right arm. His name's Tokala. He's old blood. Believes no outsider should ever share our fire." "Is he dangerous?" She didn't answer directly. "He's watching." Later that night, as Colton led his horse to the stream for water, he spotted movement in the trees. A shadow. Tall, still, watching. Colton said nothing, just stared back. The figure disappeared into the dark. He returned to camp and found Hakan waiting by his fire. "You saw him," Hakan said. Colton nodded. "Tokala. He believes he's protecting tradition, but he forgets. Tradition survives by bending, not breaking. I don't want to fight." Hakan gave a grim smile. "You might not have a choice." Colton looked to the sky. Stars overhead, endless and silent. But somewhere in the dark, trouble was already moving. The morning came with no birdsong, just a stillness Colton didn't like. He saddled his horse early, planning to scout the eastern trail, not to run, just to clear his head. But before he could mount, Tokala stepped out from behind a cedar tree, silent, unsmiling. A jagged scar ran from his jaw to his collarbone, and his eyes were like stone. "We speak," Tokala said. Colton turned slowly. "I figured this was coming." Tokala stepped closer. "You gave the blanket. That was your mistake." Colton didn't answer. "You were shown mercy," Tokala continued. "Now you think you belong. But a woman's choice does not make you one of us." Colton looked him in the eye. "I didn't come to steal her, or your ways. I came because she didn't push me away. She didn't know better," Tokala snapped. "You gave her kindness when she was weak. That is not love. That is confusion." Colton crossed his arms. "Maybe. Or maybe she saw something in me you ain't got." Tokala's expression didn't change. "You shamed her before the fire. Now you parade like her man." Colton's jaw tightened. "If you're looking for a reason to draw steel, say it plain." "I'm not here to fight," Tokala said. "Yet." He stepped closer, so close Colton could smell the smoke on his breath. "But know this. If she weeps, if she fades, if one day she looks at the fire and forgets to smile, I'll come for you. And there won't be a second warning." Then he turned and disappeared into the brush. Colton stood still, heart steady, but the words echoed. He wasn't just in a marriage now, he was walking a tightrope. And there were men waiting for him to fall. By midday, the tribe began preparing for something. Colton noticed it in the way they gathered, in the tools they sharpened and hides they stitched. Drums echoed faintly. Women painted younger warriors with ochre and charcoal. Hakan found Colton near the corral. "Tonight we honor the joining." Colton raised an eyebrow. "The what?" "The fire, the trial, The way your word becomes truth, Colton sighed. Thought I did all that already. Hakan gave a wry smile. That was ceremony. This is trust. Ahioka appeared beside them, her hair braided and woven with feathers Colton hadn't seen before. She wore a dress of soft hide, stitched with turquoise thread. You will sit by the fire with the elders, she said, her voice calm. They will ask questions, they will watch how you answer. Colton swallowed. And if I give the wrong one? You won't, she said simply, because I chose you. Colton exhaled and gave a slow nod. That night, as the moon rose high, Colton sat cross-legged before a fire ringed in stone. Elders sat across from him, men with white hair and quiet eyes. Tokala stood nearby, arms folded, watching. The questions came slowly, about land, about family, about loss. What do you believe a wife owes her husband? One asked. Colton answered, nothing. What's given should be given free. A pause. And what does a man owe her? Colton looked across the fire to Ahioka. Everything he can give. The flames cracked. The eldest man leaned forward. And if she leaves you one day? Colton didn't flinch. Then I'll let her go. I'd rather lose her than chain her. A hush fell. And somewhere, beyond the ring of faces and firelight, even Tokala lowered his gaze. After the fire ceremony, Colton stood slowly, the warmth of the flames still on his back, the weight of judgment slowly lifting. Ahioka approached without a word, stopping just close enough to hear his breath. You spoke well, she said. I just told the truth. Truth is not always welcomed. But tonight, it was. They walked away from the circle in silence, the soft hum of distant drums fading behind them. Colton noticed how the people looked at him now, not with suspicion, but with cautious respect. A door was opening, slowly, but not for all. Behind a cluster of tents, Colton caught sight of Tokala speaking with two younger warriors. Their expressions were tight, hands twitching near weapons. Ahioka followed his gaze. He won't stop watching. Colton nodded. I'd be surprised if he did. You should know, she added. His sister was taken once. By a white trader. She never returned. Some wounds don't bleed anymore, but they don't heal either. Colton looked at her. You staying with me because you have to? No, she said, because I want to see who you become. They reached the edge of the camp where Colton had set up a lean-to. The stars above them were endless, the night cool and dry. He gestured to the only blanket he still had. Not the one he gave her, but one worn and patched. She stepped close. You don't have to offer again. Why's that? Because I've already taken it. A gust of wind stirred the embers behind them. Colton looked at her, realizing something he hadn't said aloud. You're not what I expected. Ahioka's lips curved slightly. Neither are you, husband. The next morning, the calm shattered. It started with a rider, young, panting, bleeding from a scrape on his arm. He galloped into camp at full speed, barely stopping before he leapt off his horse and shouted in Apache. Colton didn't catch the words, but the meaning was clear enough. Alarm, urgency, danger. Hakan came quickly to Colton's side. A wagon train crossed into our hunting land yesterday. 6 men, armed. 2 were drunk. They fired on a scouting party. Colton's stomach sank. Anyone hurt? 1 boy wounded. They claimed it was a mistake, but they kept riding. North, too close to our winter grounds. Colton glanced at Ahioka, who'd joined them, her eyes already narrowed. They're trying to provoke something, she said. Force the chief's hand. Hakan nodded. There are always some who want war more than peace. Colton turned to him. What's the plan? Hakan looked at him carefully. We ride, a show of strength. Not blood. You should stay. Colton shook his head. I wear your daughter's name now. I ride. Ahioka's expression shifted, a flicker of worry beneath the calm. But she didn't stop him. An hour later, Colton was on horseback beside Hakan and a dozen warriors. Tokala rode at the front, silent and unreadable. The trail was dry, the dust thick, and Colton's gut twisted with every hoofbeat. He'd come here a stranger. Somehow, he was now part of a family he didn't fully understand, riding into a confrontation that could explode with one wrong word. He looked back once. Ahilka stood on a rise, wrapped in the same blanket he'd given her. Watching him go, they caught up with the wagon train near dusk. 6 men, 2 wagons, a cloud of dust trailing behind. The riders spread out silently, forming a wide arc as they approached. Colton felt the tension crackling through the air. His hands tightened on the reins, his rifle slung but ready. Hakan rode beside him, calm as still water. Tokala had already pushed ahead, his horse moving like a shadow along the ridge. One of the wagon men spotted them and yelled. Another scrambled for a weapon. Colton saw it in slow motion, the nervous hands, the raised barrel, the fear. Tokala moved like lightning, his horse darting forward. He didn't draw a weapon. He just rode straight in, lifted the rifle from the man's hands and threw it into the dust. "Enough!" Hakan's voice boomed across the clearing. The wagons stopped. "We don't want to fight," one of the men called. He wore a long coat and a silver star that caught the last of the light. "We're just passing through." "You shot a child," Hakan said coldly. "It was an accident." Colton spoke next. "So is drowning if you step into deep water with your eyes closed." The man with the star looked Colton over. "You with them?" Colton nodded once. "I'm with her." "Which means, I'm with them." The man glanced at the warriors around him. Calm, silent, deadly. "Didn't know this was claimed land," he muttered. "It's not claimed," Hakan said. "It's remembered." Colton could see the fear in their eyes now. Not from rifles, but from understanding. They'd come close to lighting a fuse they couldn't put out. Hakan leaned in slightly. "Turn around. You'll lose a day, but you'll keep your lives." The man nodded. The wagons turned. But Colton knew the trail wasn't clear yet. Something still felt wrong, and he had no idea how close danger truly was. As the wagons rolled away, the Apache riders remained motionless. Not one smile, not one cheer, just watchful silence. Colton scanned the hills again. The danger wasn't in the wagons. Not anymore. It was the quiet, too quiet. Then he heard it. A single shot, far off. Everyone froze. Another shot, closer. Hakan spun his horse. "Scouts?" Tokala's eyes narrowed. "Ambush. Outlaws, not settlers." Exploded from the ridge behind them. 8 riders. Ragged, fast, and clearly not interested in talk. Bandits who'd been trailing the wagon train, waiting for someone else to draw fire. Colton ducked instinctively, bullets slicing the air. His horse reared but held. Hakan shouted orders in Apache. 2 warriors broke off, circling to flank. Colton raised his rifle and fired once, catching a rider's shoulder. The man tumbled, crashing into sagebrush. The others kept charging. Tokala met them head-on, spear in hand, deadly precise. Colton had never seen a man fight like that. Calm fury, years of skill channeled into movement. A second outlaw fell, then a third. Colton reloaded, heart pounding. One rider broke toward him, gun drawn, wild-eyed. Colton didn't hesitate. One clean shot. The outlaw dropped. Dust, shouting, the crack of rifles. It lasted less than a minute. Then it was done. The last bandit fled. Silence returned, broken only by the labored breaths of horses. Hakan wiped blood from his cheek. They weren't with the settlers. Colton nodded. They were waiting, wanted us to take the blame. Tokala said nothing, just cleaned his blade. Then he looked at Colton and gave the faintest nod. Not of friendship, but of respect. And that, Colton realized, was harder earned than any vow. They rode back at dawn. No one spoke much. The only sound was hooves against dry earth and the call of far-off crows. Colton's clothes were dusted with powder and blood. Not his, but close enough. Ahilka met them outside the camp before they even reached the boundary stones. She ran past the guards, straight to Colton, eyes scanning him from head to toe. "You're not hurt?" "Just tired," Colton said. She touched his arm, held it a moment longer than needed. Then quietly she said, "You didn't have to ride out." "I did," he said, "because I meant what I said." They walked side by side through the camp. People stared, not with fear, but with something closer to wonder. Colton had returned, alive, beside warriors, and covered in the scent of battle. Hakan spoke with the chief in low tones. Colton waited at a respectful distance, wiping the grit from his hands. When they finished, the chief beckoned him forward. "You defended our land," the old man said. "Not because we asked, because you chose." Colton said nothing. The chief's gaze sharpened. "Then let it be known, Wade Colton walks with the Apache people. Not as a guest, as kin." A voice shouted in the crowd. Another echoed it. Applause came not from hands, but from drums. A low rhythm that vibrated through the earth. Ayoka stood beside Colton, fingers brushing his. "You still want to go back to your cabin?" she asked. Colton shook his head. "That cabin never had this." She smiled. "You're one of us now," she whispered. And Colton, loner, wanderer, son of a dying frontier, smiled back. That night, the fire burned higher than it had in weeks. A feast stretched long into the dark. Roasted meat, corn, stewed cactus, laughter rising like smoke. Children played. Elders sang. The drums didn't stop. Colton sat beside Ayoka, the red blanket around both their shoulders. No one questioned it now. Not even Tokala, who stood watch on the edge of camp, arms folded, face calm. Hakan approached with a carved bowl in hand, steam rising from it. Inside was a mixture of herbs, charred wood, and something Colton couldn't place. "Time to finish it," Hakan said. "You have been tested, you have stood." Colton looked to Ayoka. She gave a small nod. Hakan raised the bowl and spoke in Apache. Then, switching to English, he said, "This fire names you." He dipped his fingers in the bowl, marking Colton's forehead with ash. "You were born in the land of white men," Hakan said, "but you chose differently. From this night, you are Chikashni, one who walks between." Colton sat still, letting the words settle. "It means you carry both," Ayoka whispered. "Your world, ours." Colton swallowed. "That's a heavy thing to carry." "It's lighter when you're not carrying it alone." The crowd began to chant his new name, soft at first, then louder, until the rhythm became part of the fire's pulse. Colton closed his eyes. Somewhere deep inside, something long buried let go. Colton rose early, long before the camp stirred. He stepped out past the fire ring, the red blanket still draped over his shoulders. The stars were fading, and the first fingers of dawn reached across the sky. Ayoka found him at the edge of the ridge, silent as breath. "You're always up before the sun?" she asked. "Old habit," Colton said. She stepped beside him, arms folded. "The chief says we ride to the winter grounds tomorrow." Colton nodded. "I'll ride with you." She turned to him. "You know what that means?" "I do." He looked out over the land. Scrub brush, rock, sky wide enough to swallow a man whole. "Used to think this place had nothing for me. Now I can't imagine leaving." She didn't say anything at first. Then, softly, "You gave me a blanket. I gave you a name." "Strange kind of beginning." "Best kind," he replied. They stood in silence, letting the new day find them. Behind them, the tribe stirred. Soft voices, fire crackle, horses being saddled. Life moved forward. Colton turned to Ayoka. "You regret it? That I stayed?" She met his gaze. "Not once." He smiled. Then, without ceremony, without words, he kissed her. A quiet kiss, the kind that meant tomorrow was no longer a question. The sun rose behind them. The man who'd once lived alone in a shack now stood beside the daughter of a chief, no longer lost, no longer half alive. He was part of something now. Not because he took it, but because he gave. And it all started with a blanket.